Shame on him for lying. Wow, that one sentence right there, it tells you everything you need to know about a TV interview that just exploded. This wasn't your usual political back and forth. This was personal. A nation's government was put on trial live for the whole world to watch.
Welcome to Africa Watch 360. Calm, clear, and focused news you can trust. We look deeper so you understand better. So today we're going to break down what happened in that fiery interview on Piers Morgan Uncensored. You had Nigeria's foreign minister in the hot seat, and man, the questions were tough. They were all about a topic that is just incredibly sensitive and divisive, the alleged persecution and, some say, genocide of Christians in Nigeria. We're going to get into the numbers, the accusations, and the raw emotion that made this whole thing just unforgettable.
Look, this was so much more than just another TV interview. This was a battle over the story of a nation. What's really happening in Nigeria? You had activists on one side demanding the world do something, you had the government on the other defending itself, and then there's the rest of us, right? Just trying to figure out what's true.
Okay, so let's set the scene. How did we even get to this point? Well, this interview didn't just pop up out of nowhere. For a while now, there's been this growing concern, especially in Western countries, about the safety of Christians in Nigeria. We've all seen the headlines about persecution, about killings, and the pressure was building. People wanted answers.
So who are the main people in this showdown? Well, first you've got the host, Piers Morgan, and you know he doesn't pull his punches. Then you have Yusef Tuga. He's Nigeria's foreign minister, and his job was basically to defend his government. But it wasn't a one-on-one. You also had Goldie Gamari, a very vocal activist, and later we hear from Reverend Zeke, Dachima, whose story, well, it comes straight from the ground, and it's absolutely chilling.
Almost immediately, the whole thing became a battle over numbers. And you know, in a situation this serious, the numbers are critical. They define the scale of the problem. But here's the thing. The two sides weren't even in the same ballpark. It was like they were living in two different realities.
So let's look at the first number that was thrown out. This is the one you hear from critics, including some really prominent people like U.S. Senator Ted Cruz. The claim is that over 50,000 Christians have been killed in Nigeria since 2009. Just think about that number for a second. It's massive, and it's really the cornerstone of the whole argument that this is a genocide.
And that's not all. The reports that mention the 50,000 deaths, they also claim that 18,000 churches have been destroyed over the same period. I mean, when you hear figures like that, it's not hard to understand why that heavy, powerful word, genocide, is being used.
Okay, so you've got these huge, shocking numbers hanging in the air. So what does Piers Morgan do? Exactly what you'd expect. He goes right to the foreign minister and asks a very simple question. Okay, if those numbers are wrong, what are the right numbers? It's a perfectly reasonable question, right? But the way the minister responded, or didn't respond, that was a huge moment in the interview.
And this is where things get interesting. The minister, he doesn't give a number. Not at first. Instead, he changes the subject. He starts talking about national unity and how it's dangerous to count victims by their religion. He even brings up Sudan as an example of what Nigeria wants to avoid. Now, if you're a diplomat, maybe that sounds strategic, but to his critics, it sounded like he was dodging the question. Big time.
But Piers, he's persistent. He keeps pressing, and finally, the minister does give some official numbers. But, and this is a big but, the numbers are only for the last 5 years, not since 2009. And what are they? 102 attacks on churches, 177 people killed. Now compare that to 50,000. It's a staggering difference. It's like one person is talking about a small fire and the other is describing a whole forest burning down. The gap between those two stories is just immense.
But you know, this whole thing goes way beyond just a dispute over numbers. The conversation then shifted to something even more contentious. It wasn't just about how many, but what is it? What do we call what's happening? And that's when that one very heavy word came up: genocide.
We hear the word genocide thrown around, but it has a very specific legal meaning. It's not just about a large number of deaths. It's about the intent, the deliberate aim to destroy a specific group of people. And that one word, intent, that's the key to this whole debate.
So you have two totally opposing views. Goldie Gamari argues the intent is obvious. She points to attackers allegedly shouting Allahu Akbar, attacks happening on Christmas, and what she describes as an Islamist government.
But the minister completely rejects this. He says, wait a minute, these terrorists are killing Muslims too, not just Christians. He insists it's not a religious war, and that slapping the label genocide on it is not only wrong but dangerous, because it oversimplifies everything. Now, when you have two people with such deeply held, opposing views on something so emotional, you can probably guess what happened next. It got personal. Any talk of policy just disappeared. The polite, diplomatic language, gone. The gloves were well and truly off.
The minister really threw the first punch. He went right after Goldie Gamari's credibility. He basically said, she doesn't know what she's talking about. It's easy for her to sit there thousands of miles away and play games with people's lives. It's a classic move, right? If you can't beat the argument, attack the person making it.
But Goldie Gamari, she didn't flinch. She came right back at him. She didn't even bother defending herself. Instead, she said her time in politics taught her how to spot a liar, and then came that line we started with, shame on him for lying. And just like that, the interview went from tense to downright hostile.
So how did the minister respond to being called a liar? He escalated. He accused her of making money off of this. He literally said she's probably making money out of it. I mean, that's a huge accusation. He's not just questioning her facts, he's questioning her motives, her integrity. She, of course, denied it right then and there.
And that was pretty much the final blow. Gamari's last word to him was simply, "You're a disgrace." After that, well, there was no coming back. Any chance of a real conversation was over. It was just insults.
Okay, let's pause for a second because here's a part of the story many people might miss. Amidst all the shouting, the conflicting numbers, the personal attacks happening in a studio, the interview brought in another voice. A voice that wasn't about politics or statistics. A voice from the ground. And it changed everything.
We're talking about Reverend Zeke Dachima. He's not a politician. He's not an activist sitting in another country. He's a local cleric in Nigeria. And he doesn't talk about data points. He talks about what he's personally witnessed. His words are just gut-wrenching. He says he himself has performed genocide burials more than 70 times.
And the details he gives, they're truly horrifying. He describes a systematic pattern. Militants showing up on a Sunday, locking the congregation inside their own church, setting it on fire. He talks about men being pulled away from women and children and just slaughtered. And maybe the most important part? He claims that these horrific events are often ignored or downplayed by the people in charge.
So after hearing all of that, where does it leave us? The interview certainly didn't solve anything. If anything, it just left us with more questions. We have two realities, two completely different stories about what's happening in Nigeria. And you have to understand, the stakes here are incredibly high. And that's really the core issue, isn't it? The Nigerian government's version is that this is a complex security problem and that people are trying to use it to create religious division. But then you have these first-hand accounts from the ground that paint a picture of targeted, systematic violence against Christians. The gap between those two narratives is enormous. The truth, as it often does, is probably somewhere in that difficult space in between.
So now I'd like to ask you. You've heard the different sides. The huge numbers from critics, the much smaller official numbers from the government, the angry accusations, and the heartbreaking testimony from the ground. What is your honest take on this situation? I know it's not simple, but it's a conversation worth having.
One thing is for sure, this story is still unfolding. Now that it has the world's attention, the pressure on everyone involved is only going to grow. And, the next update we get could change the entire picture.
We'll keep following this story, so stay subscribed for clearer, deeper analysis from Africa Watch 360. And we do want to hear from you. What is your own take on this matter? Share your opinion in the comment section. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more breakdowns like this one.